Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Integrate Yourself podcast with Allison and Maya. I'm Allison Pillow of PureEnergyPDX.com, and you can find Maya at MayaGottlieb.com. Maya and I are both holistic coaches, and we have over 20 years experience helping clients with nutrition, movement, and emotional wellness. I wanted to also send a thank you, a lot of gratitude out to Michael Wynn of Michael Wynn Productions for providing the music for this podcast. You can find him at michaelwynproductions.sourceaudio.com. Maya and I always recommend that you're your own authority on health and wellness. We're going to be giving out some very scientific information today dealing with hormones, but we're actually going to try to keep it as simple as possible too, that so everybody can understand. We're going to be talking about estrogen, how estrogen is actually not considered the female hormone, contrary to what people hear and believe about it, as well as how it's really actually a stress hormone, and it's a stimulant. It can be creating a lot of stimulation in the body, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol. So we're going to talk about how that happens, what you can do to change that and to change your metabolism so that it functions well for you. We're going to talk about two different metabolisms in the body and how one is way better than the other as far as efficiency and function goes, and if you want to increase your metabolic rate, so please stay tuned to that as well. We're going to be talking about we're going to be giving away some really great small nutrition tips at the end there, so stay tuned for that as well. I want to reiterate that since we encourage everybody to be their own authority in their own health and wellness, we want to make sure that everybody also is encouraged to do their own research, as well as if you need the help of a doctor for a diagnosis, we highly recommend that you go to see your doctor. Please subscribe to us on iTunes. As well, if you like what you hear, give us that 5-star review. We appreciate you so much, and thank you for listening. Without further ado, here's the show. Today we're going to talk about estrogen. We're going to learn more about it, actually, what it really does in the body and how it functions. What effects does estrogen, a high level of estrogen, have in the body? You'd be surprised to know that estrogen is actually a stimulant. It does promote healing and regeneration in the body for a short time, but it is actually a stimulant, similar to the effects of cocaine, some say. So, which I thought was an interesting thing, because I think people actually rarely associate estrogen as a stress hormone, which is what we're classifying it as today. So, estrogen is also linked to higher cortisol levels as well as higher adrenaline levels. And so it can change your mood. It can create digestive distress. And we're going to get into that a little bit more as we go on. I wanted to go ahead and make a link between what we talked about on our last podcast about anger and passive aggressiveness and victimhood. And now we're bringing the physiological aspect of it into the mix. So we're going to look at that and see how that affects your actual emotions, and how actually giving yourself the reserves and the energy that you need, generating your own energy in a healthy way, can actually help you have better moods. It can help you regulate your anger or your victimhood or passive aggressiveness in a healthy way, and express yourself in a healthy way, because you have the energy to do it. So, Maya, do you have anything to add to that introduction?
I would say estrogen is definitely not as it's definitely not understood in a way that maybe needs to be seen, in the way that, the history has shown that they used estrogen to help, with therapies with female hormones and stuff, and it has a double-edged sword in terms of it does, give you release from maybe migraine symptoms, or it may help with, they put a lot in products for face, skin, and you get that plumpness, the sense that, your aging has decreased, and it gives you a false hope of what's going on, because underneath that, estrogen is, it really causes some other things to happen, like it increases calcium, increases histamines, decreases kidney function, can increase insulin, and it also can decrease vascular tone, so it increases the possibility for varicose veins. And most of the time, these seem, in a way can be seen that they, not a big deal. But if you look at what estrogen does in the cell, it's an excitotoxic cell mechanism. So basically, it excites the cell to the point where it is not able to release the water that kind of accumulates in the cell. It keeps the retention of the excitatory mechanisms going, and this was what causes cells to break, to die off or become non-functioning, which is basically the oxidative respiratory what it needs the cells to do to release the O2,
Cellular respiration.
to convert it cellular respiration and keep it to the CO2. And this is a little bit more of what we need to pay attention to, because estrogen really has an effect where it shrinks the thymus. It can do things to lowers the seizure threshold of nerve cells. So nerves have desensitization to the stimulant that they go through. So all of these things are where the body starts to show more aging.
Right. And it's also been called the female hormone. And I think that, like you said, it causes cells to die, right? So that makes sense, because it's not really a female hormone in a lot of ways. It is a stress hormone because it brings about stress in the body to release and heal. So what happens in the woman, of course, in the woman's body, is it actually releases the lining of the uterus. So this is needed every month, as well as for a miscarriage or something like that. So those are when you have high levels of estrogen in your body. So yeah, it's definitely a part of just. It's a part of killing the cell, and it's not really about actually the cell breathing, right? In a functional way.
I mean,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
functional way, I think it's probably a very easy way of describing what we're talking about without getting too in depth with the physiological processes that really happen. And what we're really trying to say is give another look to estrogen, and why why it may not be so great to have in your body as much as you think. And what I mean like that is just the tissue contains estrogen, not your blood serum. So maybe in looking at your test results from your doctor, you might say, your doctor says, hey, you have fine estrogen levels. There's nothing wrong with you. But look at the symptoms to your body. Does your body have, cellulite? Do you have a lot of body fat? Do you actually have a puffiness? These are kind of they're showing that the symptoms that their body is holding on to the estrogen, and it's not able to get out of the through the body, through the liver and through the intestines. So one of the things that I highly recommend is using eating a carrot in the afternoon to pull out the estrogen as your body is processing it, and using vitamin E to help the body release the estrogen from the cells.
I was going to actually, now I remembered what I was going to say, and it totally had to do with what you were just saying too. So when you mention going to the doctor and the doctor saying that your estrogen levels are fine, so sometimes what can happen with that is that as we age, we produce less progesterone. So the progesterone actually counteracts the estrogen. But when you're producing less progesterone in the body, you don't have that extra progesterone to counteract the estrogen. So even if estrogen levels aren't high, they still may be dominating. Estrogen may be dominating because you don't have the progesterone to counteract it. So that's why I recommend it's so important to help your body produce the progesterone by eating the right foods that are pro-thyroid and pro-metabolism through glucose oxidation.
And we're trying to see why the stress, if you're having so much stress, basically your body is increasing the serotonin, it's increasing, the cortisol stress response, and that means it has to, if you don't have enough progesterone to counteract those stress hormones, then you're going to continue to cause stress to the body through the day.
So it's going to kind of stay in a hyper state, and you kind of get into hyperglycemia in some ways too, maybe, or and the cells are very excitatory.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, and I think that's what people I think what happens, and I see this all the time, and I've seen it myself too. What you think is that, oh, I've got all this energy, but it's actually not. It's not, in my opinion, I guess, what I call healthy energy. So you're not. It's more of a. It's just an excitatory stimulant kind of energy, if that makes sense. So. It's almost like a drug in a way, I think. So people get used to feeling that high, and then they come to a point where they just hit a brick wall with their energy. I don't know if it's years later, if it's not that long later, but for me, I think it took me, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years before I just had no energy at all, and I was like, there's something wrong. So that's when I decided to look into all this stuff, and it's helped me so much ever since. What I also wanted to get into, Maya, with estrogen, is I want to talk about how an increase in estrogen would look like in the body, maybe some examples of that, and let's also talk about the two types of metabolism, because I think most people may not know the difference, and even know there are two types of metabolism. Right now, the school of thought, or the popular school of thought, is to oxidize free fatty acids. Everybody thinks that oxidizing fat, or a lot of people do, not everybody, a lot of people think that oxidizing fat is really healthy. And so it kind of sounds healthy. It's like, oh yeah, sure, I want to burn fat, right? But that's actually not a healthy thing for your body to do over a long period of time. And can you explain why? And what the other alternative is? So I'll just say the two types of metabolism are thyroid-driven metabolism, which is glucose oxidation, and the other one is pituitary adrenal-driven lipolysis, and it's also called free fatty oxidation metabolism. So that means you're oxidizing your fat, which is pretty toxic. And so, Maya, I want you to just give me your take on that.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've learned is that glucose is used in, the liver as an easy way for the liver to process and give the body its energy. And one of the things that we look at is how much stress are you carrying into the night. And when you look at the nighttime stress, you also have to look at when is the fat being burned. And from what I understand, and this is limited to the understanding of much of the physiology, but I'm gonna say what I heard is basically there's a fatty the fats are burnt at night. So when you're in nighttime stress, when your body is actually not in light and it's having more of a starvation and hibernation mechanism going on versus having a normal morning, afternoon, sunrise in the sun, you're causing that slowdown of the mechanism even more. So what we're looking at is, when are these fats being processed in your body? And if you're looking at fat and how it's being processed, then you have to look at, it says, okay, 9 calorie, and 9 energy moleculars to what you get versus burning glucose, which is 4. But what you're forgetting is the whole thing about the conversion rate and what happens when fats have to go through the fatty acid process. And so, looking at the easiest and simplest way is to find that glucose is actually needed just simply because red blood cells don't even have a mitochondria, which is part of the powerhouse that helps convert the oxygen into your system. So what you're looking at is, if you starve your cells all the time from sugar, you are creating more stress and even going into your night with more stress. And, there are symptoms that show up with a lot of people who do fat burning. There's a little bit more, passive aggressiveness has been associated with it. There's a bit of facts that hair loss can start to increase, because these are all responses of a stress that is increased, and you're not allowing the other part of the cycle to be able to come and release that stress. So those are the two things that I would say.
Nice, yeah, and it's, really, I what I hear you saying is it's premature aging is the response you
Yeah.
get, yeah, and like dry
But
skin
no one
too.
really,
And go ahead.
Yeah, but no one really understands that, because they're not looking at the bigger picture. They're looking for a fit body. They're looking for, symptom showing that they're lean and they've got this, burning machine. But really, there's other factors that we don't see until years later. And years later of, what is going on with the system and how it's driven by cortisol or adrenaline. And and how the pituitary gland is increasing because it's helped by the estrogen that's being actually taking your and weakening your bone growth. And so where we're at is looking at the long term versus the short term. And, those two mechanisms are actually showing how much stress we're putting on the body.
It directly relates to estrogen, like you said, that if you get your pituitary, if it's pituitary driven, then that's going to create stress in the body. And guess what happens when you create stress in the body? You create all those stress hormones start going off, and that's higher cortisol levels, which also affect people's ability to digest food. So if your digestion is compromised, you can't really, basically get malnourished over time, right?
True.
So that's another factor. So there's a lot of things about that. Like you may be eating all this good food, but hey, you're not being able to digest it, and so you're not getting the nutrients. You're not getting enough reserves in your body to regenerate and to make new tissue, and it's creating inflammation in the connective tissue as well. So I think over time,
Yeah.
like you said, it creates, you get injuries, arthritis. You can have mood swings, hair loss, skin issues, really dry skin. Of course, acne too. That comes into
Yeah.
it, adult acne. So, there's just, so if you're noticing, and energy changes too. I mean, you're not going to have the same type of energy with that kind of a metabolism. Your body's gonna want to reserve more energy because it's not able to do it as efficiently to metabolize the fatty acids. So it's a less efficient way of your body working here to make energy. So yeah, that pretty much, I think that pretty much covers it. So two types of metabolism. So see if, I like to give people this information so they can identify with some of this stuff. And so if some of these things relate to you, then, research it, find out, maybe dig a little deeper, find out what you can about how you can help yourself with that. And of course, Maya and I are coaches, so we can always help too. So with that, I wanted to move on to thyroid function. So of course, with higher estrogen levels, we know that can affect thyroid function, and your thyroid is your master regulator of your metabolism. So you really need that, and of course the liver to be functioning properly to have a highly functioning metabolic rate. So some of the things that I will mention about what could impair thyroid function, a diet high in PUFAs. So if you don't know what PUFAs are, it stands for polyunsaturated free fatty acids. It's a type of fat. So that's the most unstable fat there is. It's basically the veggie oils. It's that group. And then you have your monounsaturated fatty acids, and then you have your saturated fats, which are the ones that we prefer. As well as any kind of high continued stress in the body can impair thyroid function, and that includes if you are oxidizing free fatty acids constantly, or you're not eating enough, or you're not getting enough sleep, or you're working out way too much and not replenishing your reserves, or not resting enough. It could be emotional stress, or just not getting all your macronutrients that you need too, and that could be causing a blood sugar fluctuation. So those are all things that could impair thyroid function. Do you want to add to that, Maya?
Yeah, I would say it decreases liver function. I mean, really, where the polyunsaturated fats do their most damage is how it restricts the liver from its functioning. So we're back to why the thyroid doesn't work as well, and why your levels can be down. Then if you don't get enough protein to allow the body to get the amino acids that it needs to function, then you have issues with where the body will be able to sustain itself in terms of whether your muscles are going to function well, if you're going to be able to create some maybe some slow fatigue in terms of maybe just not your body, but your brain fog, where you don't get that clarity. You can cause, increase in, water retention, because the body is in such high stress that it's literally feeling like it's dehydrated, but it's actually holding on to water. And so you start to gain weight, you start to show signs of like cortisol driven, body where your body actually looks like it's the stomach. The stomach is bloated looking. It has the rubber tire kind of look, or the muffin top for women. We start to get the symptoms of a full figured woman versus the worse where the body is actually storing that fat and that fluid in the system. I think also one of the things I would say is that you mentioned skin issues. Vitamin A is a big issue, and it's decreased because of the stress hormones. So, there's a lot of things that we could list, but I think those are really good ones.
Yeah, and those are great to start with. So if people can see that in themselves, they can start looking into it. And I wanted to add on to, when we talked about the types of metabolism, I wanted to also mention just shortly the Randall cycle, and how really you've got your glucose oxidation and your free fatty oxidation. You can't, the Randall cycle, and you can look this up and look more into it, but really what that's saying is that how your body works is either you are you're oxidizing glucose for energy, or you're oxidizing fats for energy, and you can't do one or the other. So if you're in the oxidizing free fatty acid mode, then you're not going to be able to oxidize glucose. So that's why we always recommend that people start to train their body to start eating foods that are going to help your body start oxidizing glucose again, because that's what's going to really give you the energy, and it's going to help your liver function better. It's going to help your thyroid function better as well. So I just wanted to mention that really quick, just so people knew how that worked. Let's see. So,
And I would even
yeah, I think, yeah, go
simplify
ahead.
that. I would even simplify that into saying it's about your blood sugar. Are
Yeah.
you allowing your blood sugar to lower because it is stressed out and it's going into more of the fatty acid mechanism, or if it's going into the glucose mechanism where the blood sugar stays in a even pace with your body. So most of the people that have like diabetes or the issues about increase of insulin or not producing enough insulin, these are all because the body stresses. It's not just you don't produce, it's because your body on the other side of it is having to work so hard. So many of the things that are simple to understand, like those, is just, you really want your body to be able to utilize the most simplest form so that it can function the easiest.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and that's so true, because if you're already in high digestive distress, and you want to make it easy for your body to digest something, you don't want to make it even harder. You don't want to be taking a bunch of supplements that your liver can't really handle. So it's almost like just backing off from so much is better. Just simplifying it, like you said, is the way to go, especially with someone who's compromised in that way, digestively, immune, their immunity is compromised as well. They're having like autoimmune response and that kind of thing. I always recommend that people back off on putting their body under more stress.
Yeah, and I would say you got to really see that the pulse and the temperature are the keys to knowing what's really going on with your body. Finding people who have, you know, some symptoms that are really easy to pay attention to in terms of, is my body functioning in a level that is easier for me to wake up in the morning with more energy? Do I have enough energy through the rest of the day? And do I feel like by the end of the night that I can go to sleep and have a good rest night sleep? Or do I come with, maybe a lot of adrenaline causing like restless leg syndrome, or causing my some people get migraines at night too. It's a matter of how often and are you fueling your body? Simply say, there are reasons to take supplements, but the first things you want to do is, maybe take a piece of fruit or a glass of, juice, which, is another whole topic about why juice has
Yeah,
been,
it's getting a bad rap right now. It's
yeah,
like,
or,
yeah, that's like the bad guy. Sugar's the bad guy. And when we talk
yeah,
about sugar, I just want to clarify that we use sugar therapeutically, and we'll talk more about that and why in the future. But I think it's important to not cut your sugars out. Do not go low carb. I don't really recommend that to anybody, because you do need healthy fruits in your diet. You need your healthy root vegetables and your squash. Those are always good to include in your diet for energy production. But if you are having a hard time processing or metabolizing sugar, you're having these responses, it's probably not because of the sugar, it's because of the high cortisol levels.
Yes, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm addicted to sugar, and I can't get, I can't have it because I crave it so." Well, maybe it's because your body is needing it. I mean, like one of the things we do is we restrict when we think, something's wrong. Oh, we better not have that. Well, that's a symptom that's saying, "Hey." Signaling over here to tell you, come, let me have some of this because I'm in stress here. You don't get this, but I need it. And that's why I'm going to increase your need for it. And then, and then there's like this understanding that, it's not an addiction. It's not a problem. It is a real bona fide signal from your body calling for help.
Absolutely. And I think that also clarifying, this is different than a craving. A craving, I think, is different than something your body's telling you need something nutritionally. Like I remember when I cut out sugar completely for like about 3 years, I would never crave sugar more than I did then. Every day I would think about sugar. I don't ever think about it now. It never crosses my mind. I never crave it. And I guess I don't know. I don't know what to say about the craving thing because I feel like craving gets a bad rap too. Like I don't know even, I know that people talk about cravings, but I don't know. Maybe a craving isn't so bad sometimes. Maybe it is your body telling you need something. What do you think about that?
I see it now totally different. I mean, I don't see it as a willpower game anymore. I have to be strong and I have to fight myself for, that. When I started to learn about the physiology and how it works, and I am so in more of need of understanding it in a deeper level, but every time I keep coming back, it really makes more sense. So, I think what happened was it was easy way to get people to restrict it in a way that demonizing it and giving it like everything that has ever been processed in the health industry, has always been bastardized in some ways. I mean, you've got the carb diets, the low fat, the high fat, the low sugar, the high sugar. We go through these systems to kind of say, oh, this is the reason, this is why. No, no, no. It's part of the reasons why certain things seem like they connect, but they're not all the reasons why. Like just because sugar's in the process of like cancer growth or in the process of diabetes and stuff, where you're taking it out of context. You're not looking at sugar in a way that biochemically helps you understand why it's so important. And once you kind of relax into knowing that this is not some, drug that's being placed upon society in a way that's bad, it's actually here to help. I mean, most people have hyperthyroid symptoms and don't even recognize it. It's not that they have hyperthyroidism, but they do have the symptoms. Fatigue, there's, what they call chronic fatigue, and what we all know about the adrenals and what we know about, things that have happened in terms of just functioning in life is stressful. So we got to really come back to like, well, okay, if we're stressed out, like an athlete gets stressed out when he's doing their performance, they really have only one solution, and that is to get some glucose into them quickly. I mean, Gatorade is one of the biggest reasons why they're so successful, because it's based on electrolytes. It's based on the fact that the body cannot digest when it's in the most stressful point of their being. So it needs the simplest thing to have its recovery through. And so if we treated more, I think if we treated more people like athletes and stopped treating them like they were, kids, or, somebody who's bad because they eat some sweet or they eat some fat, or, they have this or that, we'd actually see that we're actually going to help more people with the energy reserves they need because they live such stressful lives.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that's a great analogy. I think because we are almost athletes. I mean, pretty much everybody lives like an athlete from a stress standpoint. You're putting your body through so much stress every day. whether it's sitting in a car for hours, commuting, getting on the phone, not eating or not getting good sleep or working out really hard first thing in the morning. I think there's all kinds of, there's so many ways that we can connect to that. So I
Yeah, and
completely
I
agree, and I
really
think
want to help.
you have to restore your body just like you do when you're an athlete. I remember like when I was in college and I worked with the head nutritionist. He was a nutritionist at Georgia State University. It was the 1997 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, and I got to actually work with him a little bit with the Olympic gymnastics team. And oddly enough, and I was a gymnast, so I know how this goes. Like basically, you'd be in the gym for straight. Well, we would be in it for 4 hours. The Olympic gymnasts probably would be in there longer. But we would practice for 4 hours without eating anything.
Oh,
And then,
wow.
of course, we'd be, just so hungry at the end. And my sister and I would just fight for who got to the to dinner first and loaded our plate up. But when I worked with him, his solution for increasing their performance was to actually have them eat more frequently and actually stop during practice and eat every 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Once they did that, they actually won the Olympics. Their performance increased tenfold and they won that year. So that to me, when I saw that, I didn't put it together till a little bit later in life, but I thought that is such a small thing, so simple, but it made all the difference in the world. And I think that's
Yes.
the mistake a lot of people are making. They're just not eating enough. They're not giving themselves enough energy. And starting
Right.
there can bring you so far.
So then you get into, okay, you're not eating enough. Then the quality of food is a problem, right? We can go simply and say organic versus non-organic. That's easy enough. But when you start to recognize what a PUFA is, and that's the polyunsaturated fats again, what you're actually looking in deeper is how is that being processed, the long chains versus the short chains, and how easily can the liver work. And the liver is the most important part of part of our organ. It does so much. I mean, I'm not even going to be able to say how much liver does because that would be a whole other stories. But I mean,
Yeah, we'll talk
episodes.
more about it down the road for sure.
But one of the issues that you're seeing is a lot of people are getting that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and they're
Right.
like, they're really going through what people do who are, have real fatty liver disease. It's the same thing, but it's the inflammation in the liver is not able to function right. And so, it is this starting to see that, and what it basically means is fats being stored in the liver cells. So these are simple things of why the body is starving, the body is holding on to things, and it can't process in the way it should by letting go of things. And so we're getting into a problem where we're seeing functionality is being slowly deteriorating. And so if we walk around living in this idea that, oh, I can only eat, this many calories in and this many calories out, so I'm constantly doing that. What we don't recognize is what brain function, how much energy that takes. We don't even realize like how much our white brain matter is basically cholesterol or 95% cholesterol. And so you put somebody on like statins because the cholesterol levels are high, you're creating a whole other level of the liver not being able to work. And so it can't do much more. But what we are living like is a total um, starvation mode in terms of not hearing the body when it's saying, I need your help.
Absolutely. And that reminds me too, like I was listening to a podcast with Ray Pete on there the other day, and Danny Roddy's podcast, which is an excellent podcast, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But I would say that he was talking about authoritarianism and how really like I guess after World War II, we started. They started promoting survival foods as health foods, so like beans and rice and I guess cabbage and kale. I don't know if kale was promoted back then, but like, and all that. So I feel like we're still promoting those as health foods, and those are just survival foods. Those are the foods you eat when you have nothing else to eat. And I think that's a
Yeah,
huge
there's
problem. Like our mentality is around that, like our whole energy is around that survival thing. So, even what we eat, and that leads to like the stress response in our body, and on and on. So, yeah, it's kind of nutty what we're doing right now.
right. And I think we're going to lean back into our first podcast was about how it helps understand where learned helplessness comes from. When you basically take the source of food away from people and then you start giving dogma in terms of how to lose weight. And it may have all started in just an, opening of, knowledge and all, but then as you, like, oh, we're going to help society, and but then you start to see how we're being driven by corporations. And then the corporations then have their agendas. And then we get into the issues of how they're educating our next generations, how they've dismissed research because, it didn't comply with what they wanted to sell. And we start to live a model that is more controlled than we realize. And then, if you don't have that awakening one moment where you say, this doesn't make a lot of sense, I need to get it. There's just this isn't working. More cancer is occurring, more fatigue, more issues of obesity, and then we're getting into these conversations of, no one seems to feel like they can get out from under the pressures, of, how do I afford this? How do I live and have a happy life? But all of what we're noticing is that these are starting to trickle in to keep us in this suppressed state, to keep us into this, I am so fatigued I cannot do one extra thing. I only can do what I'm doing right this moment. And so we never get to think out of the box. We are driven by our 9 to 5 jobs. We're, driven to watch TV, to numb ourselves out with alcohol or drugs. And we're getting to a place where society is just, either going to break and say no more, or we're just going to keep falling into a situation where more death, more, health issues will be coming up. And, we just kind of have to kind of take a stand and just use our own intuitive voice that says, hey, something's up and something's amiss, and I need to kind of, take another look at something.
Absolutely. And you start with yourself, like asking questions, asking the right questions, like don't just always accept things for how they are. If you want your life to be better, you have to start making that change within yourself. And so that's what we're talking about here. And this all leads back to what we started with, which is estrogen. And, that can be a huge factor in motivation, moods, and staying in that victimhood state. So I wanted to talk kind of end, I guess, with the last subject part of our podcast here. I wanted to mention ask you what foods you would recommend to aid a person in the process of either rebalancing the estrogen in the body naturally with food, or I guess if they have too much estrogen, what would you recommend if they're, because the detoxification process of estrogen can be pretty overwhelming if it happens too quickly, because estrogen gets stored in the fat cells. And that's, I think you mentioned earlier, people who are overweight have a lot, are pretty estrogen dominant, and that's because estrogen gets stored in the fat cells. So especially if you're burning free fatty acids, if you're oxidizing fat and you have a lot of estrogen in your fat cells, that can also be pretty rough, right? So what foods, I know from off the top of my head, I would say first step would be to eat more frequently. Keep your blood sugar levels from fluctuating. Mm-hmm. And I guess the second thing would be eat carrots. Eat one raw carrot a day, right? And it seems so simple, but why is that, Maya?
Well, because it's an antifungal and it actually pulls the estrogen through the gut tissue. So it actually removes the estrogenic foods that maybe if you've had soy or PUFA or alcohol, because these are the exotoxins that get into the gut because of low thyroid function. You cause the metabolic rate to slow down, which then increases the bacterial increases in your gut flora, and then you have endotoxins, which are basically creating more issues for not being able to digest food. And so, one of the things that you would want to, kind of use is the pure a carrot. You can also do what Ray Pete talks about is a carrot salad, and you actually take the carrot and you shred it into long pieces. Then you take vinegar and coconut oil and some salt, and you make a carrot salad. And the length of the carrot actually, length cuts are really great because they literally like drag through the gut lining and help, get rid of the estrogen. One of the biggest things is getting enough protein, based on your physiology and how it works for you. You want to slowly bring back, a little bit more increasing. Some would say getting up to about 100 grams of grams of protein a day. You have to be really careful about eating too much muscle meat. So I would say getting glycine in, which is basically from bone broth, heals the gut and also brings the amino acids to the body in a healthier way. So that's, taking bones, and doing a bone broth. We have recipes that we can give you. Eggs are, good for the cholesterol and how much protein is in it. And it's the whole egg. It's not just, egg whites anymore. A lot of people believe that egg whites were, important, but they only contain like the potassium, the magnesium, sodium, but you want other parts in that are in the egg yolk, so the carotenoids, the vitamin A, the vitamin D, and K. I mean, these are extremely important. The calcium and the iron and the phosphorus, and so you're kind of getting, and especially the B6s. So these are things where, nutrient-wise, food is so important, and eggs actually have the essential amino acids. So that's like kind of what I'm listing for you. But, and then I would say, milk. Milk is an important, protein, sugar, it's basically sugar protein. And, people have a little issue with milk, lactose issues. This can be something we could talk about later too, but go back to the digestion and how well is your digestion functioning. So the bloating, the inability to digest is really about the endotoxins and how much your thyroid isn't functioning enough for the body to keep the energy in your gut moving. And so those would be some of the bigger things I would do. There's a lot more. I would totally recommend a book called How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. She has incredible information and some recipes that would be helpful to most people. And I would say to also avoid seeds and nuts as much as possible while you're first starting this, because of the high levels of PUFA. So I think that's a couple things I would suggest.
Yeah, I think, and it's so simple. Just keeping it simple, I think, is better. Not getting too complicated with it because it doesn't have to be complicated. I would also recommend for sure the Metabolic Blueprint Cookbook. Josh and Jeannie have some really great recipes, very creative recipes. If you like to be a little more creative in the kitchen, they're really fun. And they also have some gelatin dessert recipes there. And I was also mention, what do you think? I use gelatin with my muscle meats. Whenever I'm eating the muscle meat, I either make a gravy with some bone broth and add the gelatin to it, or I actually add the gelatin straight onto my loose meat if I'm making like tacos or something. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that's a good starter. I would say slow with the gelatin. Sometimes the gelatin can be hard to digest, and so, make sure you're, giving yourself a good time to kind of adjust to it, because it's definitely able to give you the simplest of the amino acids, which is glycine, and that's where it totally helps with like the blood and how it carries the oxygen, but mostly what it's doing is giving those amino acids back that you need the most. And if I were to use it, I would just, you could, start your day with it, and then, minimize it by the end of the night so that you're not having a lot of digestion problems. So that would definitely be a good thing. And I think yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is if you're having any symptoms where you don't feel you can digest it, go back to making some bone broth or something. And I also wanted to kind of remind people that, if you can't do milk, like it's really hard for you, you can always do some cheese. Like
Yeah, I was going to
cheese
say
is
that too.
really good.
Yeah. Yeah, because,
Yeah.
that's a good place to start, right?
Yeah, those are really good places to start, and don't be afraid of cheese. I have known so many women that are so afraid of cheese,
I
and it's
know.
like,
Yeah.
it's really not what people have made it. I hate to know, to listen to that, because you got to go back into like the looking at different cultures, and many of our cultures, like France and all these people that don't do fortified things like vitamin A or D in their flour and stuff, they basically use cheese and things in their foods. And there's a whole understanding of why these combos of foods work for them. They have the high fat cream, they have the cheeses, and they can digest gluten. It's really important to notice why these other cultures have less problems with these foods, whereas we, as a culture in America, we deny ourselves even those good things.
Absolutely. I think, and that's a great way to end today. I was just watching, I don't know if you guys aren't watching the show called Chef's Table, and if that doesn't inspire and motivate you to make your food more beautiful and make the whole process more enjoyable, I don't know what does. And it's a great thing to see other cultures, like you said, Maya, actually putting so much beautiful energy into their food, and really it's kind of like it's like a ritual over and over again. It's like you're really you're just in love with it, and just into the experience of it. And I think that's what it can be for everybody if they just look at it that way. And then therefore, what you're putting in your body is a beautiful thing, and then your body is beautiful because of that, and it's functioning well, you're happy, it's joyful. Eating for a lot of cultures is a part of their lifestyle, and it's a part of their day, and they work that time, they put some real time into sitting and eating, and the whole experience of it, and the socialization of it, so the social aspect. So I think that's important to realize too. And I don't know that we do that as much in this country, but I hope we can start changing that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a passion for food that we have. I think there's a lot of foodies that people, may like that word, may not like that word, but it is a description of our society's obsession with food. And in obsession, meaning that it can be, on the light side and the dark side, but the
Right.
thing is that it's a survival mechanism that we have to find a mutual agreement with, to kind of harmonize ourselves with. It's not something you can live without.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to eat, to keep the body working. You can try fasting. That's a whole other problem that we can talk about later on, but and what that does. But fasting is a cortisol driven mechanism that when we look at what it's doing long term, it's another reason why we weren't meant to fast all the time. We, what we're looking for is a way to really find peace with food, and really come to, you know, our own sense of um, authority driven, not someone else's authority, giving ourselves the window of opportunity to, really play again with our food, I guess. It's kind of
Yeah.
a silly way of saying it, but it's true. I mean, being creative with our food, what we've lost in this whole, health industry and restricted dieting and stuff has really
It's a,
created a problem.
it's a total downer.
Downer, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you, Maya. And it was so good talking to you as always. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please give us a great review on iTunes, as well as you can give us a review on any podcast app and subscribe to our podcast as well. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of stuff, we'll be talking about low energy, what that looks like, how you can help low energy with your very practical steps with nutrition, but also how to integrate movement into your life and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And for people, especially with low energy, people who don't actually have enough energy to even make it through the day, much less try to work in a workout. So definitely check us out next week when I release that one. Thank you to Maya for doing the podcast with me every week, and thank you to Michael Wynn with Michael Wynn Productions for providing the awesome music that we have on this podcast. If you want to check me out, if you want to check my website out, it's you can find me at pureenergypdx.com. And if you want to check Maya out, you can find her at mayagottlieb.com. Thank you again for listening, and we will talk to you next time.